Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to the Penguin Palace Stamps YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be showing how to make this interactive double slider card where you have both the kangaroo and the frog jumping over their hurdles and they slide at the same time. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting with a card panel that I've cut out of some nice heavyweight white cardstock that's good for ink blending, and I cut it to be just slightly smaller than the size of a full card base. As you can see, I've already partially die cut a couple of circles into the front of the card. So basically for this, I just used two circle dies, a bigger one and a smaller one on the left side, and then the same thing on the right side. And I passed the paper with the circle dies through my die cutting machine, with the top plate of the die cutting machine only partially across the circles. So that top plate was only halfway laid across the circles. And that way, the die cutting machine only cut out the top half of the circles, leaving these half circle arches cut into the paper. Now I'm ink blending onto the background, and I used a blue color for the sky, and then a green color for the grass, and then a yellow color to kind of show like a track. The colors that I'm using for this out of the Distress Oxide inks are Tumbled Glass, Scattered Straw, and Shabby Shutters. I used my Picket Fence Studios life-changing blender brushes to blend those colors onto the paper, and that's how you get that nice soft look. So basically, those areas where I cut out the arches with the two circle dies are going to be what are the slider channels of the card. So I needed them to be hollow to allow for space for the slider mechanism to move. So because I had only partially die cut the circles, they didn't actually cut out the edges of the sliding arch. So I just went in with my snippy scissors and cut out the bottoms there so that you get the empty arches in the card front. And again, this is where the slider mechanism will be. So I'm going to put actually a nickel behind each of those arches, and then the nickel will slide around within the arches. So there you can see the card front with the two arches cut out side by side. By the way, if you have dies that will cut out these shapes, by all means go ahead and use them. So these would be slider dies that a lot of companies will sell. But I didn't have the ones in the exact shape that I wanted, so I just used circle dies to kind of get the same effect. I knew that I wanted that sky to be blue even behind the slider channel, so on the card base, I'm just blending on a little bit more Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink, and this will allow that blue to peek through the slider, and it'll look like completely seamless on the front of the card. Again, I'm just using my blender brushes here, and I love the blender brushes because they do give a really nice soft effect. So the next step in building the slider mechanism for this card is to elevate the whole card front up onto some fun foam. And this gives the card front a little bit of elevation and enough space for the slider mechanism to move around behind it. So in this case, it allows for the nickel to slide around in those arches and have enough space to do so. So I'm just cutting out some pieces of fun foam to be about the right size to fit along the top edge and then along the bottom part of that card. And the key thing about this that I've learned in building a lot of slider cards is to just give enough space for the slider mechanism to move around. So you don't want to put any fun foam too close to those open areas of the arches. You really want to leave enough space. And from what I can tell, there's not really any such thing as too much space. You really don't need to sandwich those areas with fun foam too closely, because what you'll notice is that once you put the nickels in and then you put some foam squares onto them with the critters, it's almost like they're sandwiched into that space. So they can't move around because the foam square popping off of them and the critter popping off of them onto the card front is locked into that arch, if that makes sense. So you really don't want too much fun foam in the back because you don't want anything interfering with the movement of those nickels or pennies or whatever you end up using for the slider mechanism. So the other key thing to remember is that when you put the card front down onto your card base after putting the fun foam on the back, just make sure that you put your slider mechanism in there first. So put your penny in, put your nickel in, make sure it's there, or else it'll be really hard to jimmy it in after. I have had to do that and it's doable, but it's just a little bit annoying. So I also just put a foam square onto each nickel, and that allows something to adhere the critters to. The next step in this card is to color in the critters with Copic markers, or really any coloring medium of your choice. For this card, I stamped out the kangaroo and the frog and 2 of those cute wooden hurdles from the Happy Track and Field Chapter 1 stamp set by Penguin Palace Stamps. This stamp set is really adorable. It comes with a bunch of different critters, and they're all doing sort of track and field related activities like running or relay or cheering, and it's just super cute. And they actually released a companion stamp set called Happy Track and Field Chapter 2, which has a lot of complementary images and sentiments, so it's really neat if you end up going for both of these stamp sets. You can use them together and they complement each other really, really well. So like I said, I'm using my Copic markers for this coloring, and I actually went ahead and stamped these images off camera with some Copic-friendly black ink. And I stamped them onto some Copic-friendly white paper as well. I personally use Neenah Solar White for this because it's the type of paper that really absorbs Copic marker ink really nicely. It doesn't bleed, and it allows them to blend really easily. For the kangaroo, I just used a few different shades of brown, and for the frog, I'm just using a couple different shades of green. And I'm using some more light and yellowy toned greens to color in his little belly. Something I've been trying out lately in my Copic coloring, and something that I tried out on this card, was to use little dots in the areas of shadow to kind of add dimension and further shadow. And I think that it adds a really nice texture to the images as well, especially for the cute critters where the dots almost end up looking like fur or like kind of speckles. So now it's time to assemble the card together. And as you can see, I already stamped out the sentiment from the stamp set, which is "You jump, I jump." And I just stamped that right onto the card front in some black ink along the bottom there to kind of fill in the negative space. I'm then gluing those little motion lines that come in the stamp set onto the kangaroo to kind of give him the image of looking like he's in motion. And actually the frog stamp set already comes with those image lines, so that's already good to go. But just to keep in mind, if you didn't want those motion images on the frog, you could very easily just cut them out, so they're by no means attached to the image. You could have totally used the frog image without the motion lines if you wanted to. So I went ahead and glued down those hurdles onto the card front with some liquid glue, and now it's time to just put the critter images directly onto the foam squares that are taped or glued onto the nickels, which are the slider mechanisms. And this way the critters will be able to slide along with the nickels and their little sliding arches. And I was really careful here to place the critters directly over the nickels so that they covered them, so like the bodies of the critters covered the nickels so you can't see them. But as you can see when I slide it around, there's definitely some angles where you can see the coins beneath the critters, but I think it's just one of those things where you can't care about those little things too much. These cards are handmade, so I think it's sort of a given that, you know, little things like that are fine. So the last thing that I wanted to do to finish off these cards was to just add a little bit of extra sort of dimension and grounding to those hurdles. So I just took a couple Copic markers that were similar shades to the Distress Oxide inks that I had used to blend the grass and the track, and I added a couple dots around each of the bases of the hurdles, so some tan dots and some green dots, just to kind of give almost like a speckled dirt grounding shadowy effect. So that is the card for today. As you can see, when I tilt it back and forth, those 2 critters both move, they jump over their hurdles, and they move freely in those arches really easily. So I really love the cool kind of interactive element of slider cards. I think it's so fun. So thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to Penguin Palace Stamps. And if you want to see more cards like this, please go ahead and check out Penguin Palace Stamps on Instagram, as well as my personal Instagram page, Ashley Young Paper, which are both linked down in the description box below. Thanks for watching. Bye!